Hello, hello. Good afternoon.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Stacy?
I'm fantastic. Happy Sunday afternoon to you.
Happy Sunday.
Thanks so much for agreeing to this and having the idea to talk about science and spirituality together. I know that we've both expressed that, like, some of the concepts are super deep or really random, and it's so nice to have somebody to bounce things off of and break things
Yeah,
down. So
yeah, totally. I know like you and I were connected in the Healy world for a reason. And I've always felt this draw that we're both like deeply attracted to the scientific aspect of this device and just life in general. And we have the ability to translate some of the concepts in a way that's more digestible for people. So that's where I got the idea that we could go through this book and kind of just give a brief summary and take some of the important concepts or concepts that like really land for us and translate them. Mhm.
yeah, I agree. I think it's so great to take something that can seem so vast and like funnel it down in a sort of easy way to understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Should we do a little like groundedness to get here in this moment before
Yes,
we begin? Okay, cool.
yes.
I like to put my hand on my heart today and close my eyes. Inhale through the nose and then exhale through the mouth. Bring your awareness into the space you're into your breath as it continues to flow in through the nose, out through the mouth. Awareness into the body, arriving here in this moment, mind, breath, body. May we be present and clear in our communication as we ground into the energy of the earth below and to the heavens above. In our time together now.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
Hey, first of all, the cover. My goodness. The Physics of God. And I know I first learned about this book through our Healy community, through Yan, one of the men who's developed the deep cycle. How about you?
Yeah, that's where I learned about it too. And I think
Yeah.
we both said as soon as he brought it up, the physics of God, it was like boom, that book.
And I love how the other day when I'm like, oh my God, this book is so great. And you're like, I know.
Yeah. Mhm.
um, Yeah, to have something, it says how the deepest theories of science explain religion and how the deepest truths of religion explain science. And I just love how those are like brought together in this way.
Yeah.
Um, of course, it's got the like introduction and the foreword, which I really appreciate. Gives it a little more personal touch.
Yeah,
Um,
I in the intro, he kind of goes into the author has a lot of scientists in his family and like doctors and stuff and like a lot of factual information needed to be present to like always prove the validity of things, right, in his family. And then he went to school to become a scientist, and then he had a transcendent experience that made him like want to see the bigger picture. And like that for me strikes home because I have a similar story of like studying science and then having transcendent experiences that um couldn't really be explained. And it just like led me down the rabbit hole of like, I need more information about that. And then enter like quantum physics starts to answer some of these questions that modern physics really wasn't answering in terms of like spiritual experiences and things like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciated his story too about how like he basically got to combine like the knowledge, the like logical side of himself, and then the experiential through his transcendence experience. And it's just like
Mhm.
you can't deny what you feel. And so I know many of us who are really curious and we're like, once we feel it, we're like, how, why, what? And there's the rabbit hole that you talk about for sure.
Yeah.
Um, chapter 1 is called The Religion of Science. And
Mhm.
I really appreciate how he basically talks about scientific materialism, the way that we've thought about science and reality for the last 200 to 300 years, or at least being purely materialistic.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
and
and like the materialistic as in composed of energy and matter, right?
totally, yeah,
That's
I wrote a couple notes and it says basically that everything springs from interactions of matter and energy and from absolutely nothing else.
right.
And I like how he basically says, like, the religion of science is because of this absolutely nothing else. It's a belief, it hasn't been proven. And
Mhm.
it kind of turns it into a dogma over the last 300 years, where a lot of scientists are very like opposed to considering
Mhm.
answers to some of those questions.
Yeah, yeah. And so the religion or the science, I mean, like religion then brings in this idea that there could be information on the energy, right? Or in like information traveling through the matter and the energy. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And the thing that came to mind when we talk about like that everything is either matter and energy, it's like that's the same thing to me. It's just matter's one end of the spectrum, and what we
yeah,
consider energy is the other end. So it's like it's not two things,
yes. Oh, yeah.
but it kind of is.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in terms of like yogic philosophy, there's consciousness and form, right?
Mhm.
And so the
Totally.
form is speaking to the matter and the energy.
Right.
And it's like science is just missing out on this consciousness piece because of our lack of ability to prove it exists.
Hmm. Yeah. But there's a lot of experiential,
Right.
recounts. Yeah.
But in terms of like lab work and like,
Well, that's
'cause-
what quantum physics now does with like random event generators and stuff,
right.
which we'll
Yeah.
get.
Yeah, because I'm taking an astronomy class this semester, and so getting like little like reminders about what science is. And the teacher always says it's not science unless you can study it, reproduce the results, and write a paper about it, and then have other scientists approve of the paper. Like that's what makes it science. Um, which is interesting. So if the scientists aren't considering consciousness and considering ways to measure consciousness, and then wanting to present that to their peers, then it wouldn't emerge into the
Right.
field of science.
It doesn't mean it's not there though.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
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 And I
And
think
it is happening. Like with Marcus Schmieke is right, and like so many others are writing about this kind of
Mhm.
interchange between science and
Totally.
spirituality.
Yeah. I was gonna say it almost seems like that perspective is almost dogma too. Like it's like if it doesn't follow the scientific method, then
Right.
we can't consider it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of talked about in this first chapter.
Mhm.
What else did I write here? Oh yeah, and how he talks about how some really well-known scientists like Rupert Sheldrake and Graham Hancock had TED Talks that brought up about this exact thing about how science has some like holes in it, basically.
Yep.
Did you happen to go check those out?
Their TED Talks.
Yeah.
No, I haven't, but I love Graham Hancock and I've read
Yeah,
some
totally.
of his books and
Yeah, when I first got the book, I checked them out, and it's true. They just talk about some of the, like, one of them talks about consciousness, and the other one's like where science is fundamentally flawed, and they got
yeah.
stuck at the end.
Yeah, I appreciate these people, like scientists coming forward and questioning like what is the truth. And I think so like we need more and more people like that because the story that we're sold like in like I feel it just like being back in the university setting is like everything that's being taught, this is the absolute truth. Like especially in the science and math world, this is how
Right,
it is. And they're not
totally.
asking you to question it. They're just asking you to understand it with your mind. And there's like not this opportunity to actually ponder, well, is this true?
Like kind of go behind it almost, or
Right. Yeah. And so I
yeah,
see how people that do question it often in our society get like cast to the side or
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And then quantum physics comes in because basically what happened was that, as we were talking about the observer effect,
Mhm.
if you want to go into that a little bit, how that was ultimately the thing that kind of like, well, I'm sure there was things before that, but one thing that really threw science off.
Yeah. It was so the observer effect is is what they began to see was that objects didn't exist unless somebody was consciously observing them in space. And I'm not going to remember exactly like the what the experiment was they did that proved this.
Well, it was like the double slit where they
It-
first threw like a light beam through and they got interference patterns of waves, which was like expected.
yeah.
And then they, instead of the whole beam, they started to shoot just single photons through, I believe it was. And they
Mhm.
expected it as to be like a particle and land like a bullet would as you shot it at a target. Like,
Right.
but instead it still had the same wave pattern.
Yep.
So it's like it's behaving as a particle and a wave. I don't understand.
Right.
And oh yeah, superposition. They figured out that it was like it was going through both slits and no slits and one slit and the other slit at all times. So it was like, how is this
Yeah.
possible? And then when they stuck the measuring device was
Right.
when the single one went through and acted as a single one.
Right. Yeah. And
Yes.
so the double slit experiment is what proved that the energy is both a particle and a wave. And
Mhm.
that disproves like so much of what was believed to be the truth before it and left scientists in just kind of a like, okay, if that's the truth, then we don't actually know anything for sure.
Like nothing actually exists until we're paying
Yeah.
attention to it.
Right.
Or
And so
it exists as every possibility until you
yes.
do it.
Until you see it into being. And I think like, you know, I in meditation, like we have this experience in our dreams. Like we are literally like projecting the image in front of us as we dream, as we visualize. So that experience seems a little more tangible, I think, for people than the one that like you're walking around in this three-dimensional world and projecting everything around you. And it wouldn't be there, and it wouldn't be there if you weren't looking at it.
If you weren't, yeah, participating.
Your observation creates it collapses the wave into a particle
Yeah,
that
totally.
makes you a solid instead of just energy wave
Right. A
leaving through.
perceived solid because you're still not solid. Oh, I
So
love it.
you're only there right now because I'm looking at you.
Right. No,
So I mean, that concept is huge. And
huge.
and it's accepted in quantum physics world. Like it is accepted. And also, I don't think it's fully integrated across, like it's not fully integrated because you would have to
No.
be a cuckoo to like believe that all
All
throughout. in all the areas of your life.
Yeah, and what I had read in his book was that like quantum mechanics solved the like probability and math part of that, but it
uh
didn't really resolve the like deeper aspects of what it meant for like reality, because that seemed to be more like philosophical type arena.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
and then he
I want
talks
to
about, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm gonna just add something. I was listening to Richard Rudd, the creator of the Gene Keys this week, and he said something about like that he's known for a long time that the new science will be the study of the absolute truth, where the old science is like all based on probability. Because it like in science class, like every answer you come to is like, 3.78 meters squared plus or minus this chance of probability. Like when you
Right,
get into the deeper layers of like of
right.
physics, that it's like no answer is absolute.
There's like a deviation
Right.
in,
And so how do we find absolute answers
okay.
when we don't know if energy is a part like if energy could be a particle or a
Yeah,
wave?
when reality isn't absolute, I don't
Right.
think you can really.
Right.
um, he also goes on to how quantum physics has other modes of like other ways it poked holes in this like well-known belief. Was about the placebo effect and how it was inexplainable that mind was affecting matter. But he goes on to talk about how a couple studies. There was one with like cancer patients who were taking chemo, and there was one with a chemo, one with saline, and a placebo. And 30% of the placebo people ended up losing their hair.
Mhm.
And also the multiple personality disorders, where
Yes.
like physiological changes happen like pretty much instantaneously that are like not possible, such as like eye color changing from personality or allergies or
Right. And so you feel like that brings us back to the observer effect with multiple personality is that they change personality and suddenly they're seeing themselves through a new lens that immediately shifts the physical form that we
yeah.
are. Like say, you had a big scar on your hand that
Mhm.
instantaneously could be cleared. That's proving that what we think is solid is not actually so solid.
And like just a different perceived reality, because
Yeah,
you're, yeah, when you're like switching characters,
yeah,
yeah, you feel different, right? If your thoughts and feelings is what like your physicality comes through as, then yeah,
eh, yeah,
wild. And then also like the work with the random event generators and
yep,
Pairs Institute, and how basically they would have like apples and say oranges on a screen doing the total randomness that was usually about 50%.
yep,
And then when they had the person who was like paying attention to the screen decide, I want more apples versus oranges or whatever, um, the deviation there was enough to show that this person could affect the results.
right,
They could like change the randomness basically.
yep, with their thoughts.
Yeah.
Mm,
And back to like the whole religion of science, that talks about how Pear's been studying this for like 27 years and has never had their studies published in one of the more reputable journals. And it's not for a lack of trying.
hmm.
How just the idea that when you bring consciousness into science, that you're like
Yeah,
crossing a boundary or something.
yeah. It's like back to my astronomy class. Right now we're learning about the cycles of the moon and like literally looking at how the moon's gravitational field bulges out, creates the tide, but there's this huge bulge of water coming off of the surface of the earth from the gravitational field of the moon. And like, my professor's up there like teaching about this stuff, like, and here's all the numbers, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and so this doesn't affect our bodies, right?
Right, totally. No.
70% water body, and like there's no way that could possibly impact our brain either, and like the experiences that we're having, and like you know, that's really laughed at. It's like I'm getting laughed at that I think that potentially the moon impacts how
The
I
one.
feel
Right,
in the science world. And
right.
so yeah, I'm really excited to work our way through this book to kind of come into seeing some conclusions about how we're going to be able to bridge the two, because they're definitely bridging already. We know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, like everything's interconnected. You can't,
Right.
you can't. We tried that separation, you
Yeah.
know, we
Yeah.
tried that, and that was like all materialism, like the body's a machine and it works through chemical and biological processes, and there's nothing else in the background where, and even the Eastern traditions have known for a very long time through experience that
Right.
that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the intro he says like the bridge between Eastern and Western science is meditation and the
Mhm.
experience of meditation, because it can be repeated and observed and
Yeah,
studied. And
yeah.
so in my personal experience, meditation is absolutely has been the bridge between
Hmm.
my like logical mind and my intuitive self.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I love how, like, as we know, both with Healy and Marcus, it's that exact thing, the quantum scientist and the Vedic monk.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it's a powerful combination. Uh,
hmm.
yeah. So do you think we kind of got through chapter one?
I think so. I really enjoyed the last page of chapter one here. There's a couple quotes on there. One
Yeah.
from, like, and this is where he talks about some really prominent scientists, and how they feel about it. But Einstein has a part here where basically says that you'll hardly find one among the profounder sort of scientific minds without a peculiar religious feeling of his own. But it is different from the religion of the naive man. His religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority that, compared with it, all the systematic thinking and acting of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection. And
Yeah.
you don't often hear Einstein quoted in that way. Like,
Right.
that's the first time I've read that quote of his.
Uh,
Because he's
yeah.
basically saying, like, oh yeah, there was also a part in there where they were like, when they surveyed scientists, 52% of them said they were religious, but yet they don't. Like, what's that?
Yeah.
You know?
I think when you're studying the concepts you're studying in science are often like so huge that if you don't find something to ground you into a purpose and your body, and like for religion, that's I think what it serves for a lot of scientists. They need that, or you would lose your mind.
Hmm. Totally.
Kind of
And yeah, next one is, so we just did the religion of science, and chapter two is the science of religion.
yes,
That'll be fun to explore.
yes, okay. Oh, I can't wait.
Yes.
Thank you, Stacey. Of
You're welcome. Thank you for chatting it up. And I look
course.
forward to sharing more ideas with you.
Yes, me too. And I will like drop in the caption of the video, I'll time mark the certain different things that we talked about too.
Okay, perfect.
Yay,
Have a lovely day.
you too.